Barrie City Council is once again pitted against its residents, this time over two multi-million-dollar projects along Barrie's waterfront. On Wednesday, in an overflowing council chamber at City Hall, councillors gave initial approval for a 1,500 square meter new youth sports field and a 1,600 square meter expansion of the Southshore Centre. This expansion will serve as the new home for the Sea Cadet. We spoke to the representative of the Sea Cadet. The interview you will find at the end of the video. At the same time, a change.org petition titled Say No to Developing a Multi-Use Sport Field and Parade Grounds at the South Shore and Allandale Park has gathered more than 1,200 signatures as of Sunday morning. The signatories argue that the development threatens the habitat of the local wildlife and disturbs the peace enjoyed by residents who appreciate the quietness of the woodland nature at night, and also reached out to the petitioner of the change.org. These projects carry a combined cost of more than $9 million to build, almost evenly split between the field and the South Shore expansion. Many residents, both for and against the project, are likely to speak on May 15 when the City Council is expected to consider the final approval. Following is the video of the meeting.
I think the majority of folks here tonight are here for the relocation of the Sea Cadets and the parading a sports field next to that. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to make two changes to the agenda. The first one is I'm going to move those two to the front of the pack. And the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to allow debate on both at once. The reason for that is I'll get into and explain a little bit in a second. So I'm going to ask Councillor Kungle to withhold your amendment at first and put the item on the floor with regards to the parading and sports field. Yes, please.
Okay. I'd like to put the item on the floor as presented.
Okay. And after we have the vote, then we will vote on the other one, which is the South Shore, but I'll allow speaking to both at once because they are so connected. One of the things I wanted to do before we got into the holistic debate on this is to set a little bit of context and background, because one of the things that I heard yesterday from some of the members of the public was that they hadn't been alerted to the changes that were coming down the line. And I think some of that, I would say a majority of it, is we live in a world where there's no newspapers going out anymore, and Councillor Negusi's actually asked for us to look into a way to secure another newspaper back here. But it's left some gaps. So Carl, if we can go to Google Earth or Google Maps or whatever you have available, perfect. So at the meeting, I believe the end of September, there were a number of things that were approved by.
Could the volume please be put up? It's difficult to hear.
Is that better? Okay, sorry about that. So there's a few things that were approved in the meeting in September that I think have an impact on the South Shore of the City of Barrie. First of all, if you look at Allandale Station, to the east of that, we approved staff going and coming back with an Indigenous space, a space that we could have set aside for members of the Indigenous community, both those who reside in the City of Barrie and those who are part of the traditional groups that use the land, whether it was the Wendat or right up through. That was to the east of Allandale Station, as you see on this map. The second things that we approved was the planting of 1,000 trees on our waterfront, which will be around the waterfront, but I would anticipate a lot of those trees would actually be on the South Shore. So we're waiting for that plan to come back, but that's 1,000 trees that will be planted on our waterfront around the city. The third thing that was approved for the South Shore is partnership with the Barrie Huronia Rotary to create, and I'm sorry if I get the name of the tree wrong, but I believe it was the cherry bud, which is like a cherry blossom, and it creates that type of both spring and fall, I guess, ambiance where you've got everything flowering at once. And in Washington, D.C., the Rotary Club there does something similar with a native species, and that would be planted somewhere from around the wastewater treatment facility right down to Minette's Point to help with that, and maybe even on the south side of Lakeshore Drive as well. The other item we had asked for, I'll get into in a second, which is what the crux of the matter is this evening, was the relocation of the Sea Cadets from downtown to the South Shore. So Carl, if you can bring up the slides, if that's okay. So first of all, I've said around this table many times that accurate information is incredibly important. And when we don't bring accurate information, whether we mean to or not, it becomes a little bit dishonest. And one of the things that we struck today when I was sitting with the clerk going over the staff report was that in the staff report, and I've said this publicly, I think I might have been the first person to say it, quite frankly, and I said it yesterday in the ANA meeting that we had, the size of a parading ground is roughly half the size of a field, a soccer or football field. The fact is not that, and when we were looking through it today, it says it's roughly 80 by 160 paces, which equates to, when you do the math, around 14,464 yards cubed. So I just wanted to apologize for that, because that was something I did say in a meeting yesterday that was inaccurate, and something that's inside the report as well that's inaccurate, and I think we need to make sure that that's righted up front. Next slide, please. So as you can see, this is the current Sea Cadets space. They have been using that for many years. They have a lease on this for another 23-ish years. And it's both an issue for the city of Barrie, and it's also an issue for the cadets. If you can go to the next slide. You'll see that on both sides of the cadet space, they have the transient docks to the, what I'll refer to as the east, and then they have the full-time dockage to the south. And if you can imagine being a 10 or 11 or 12-year-old child trying to launch a 12-ish foot sailboat out of there, and you've got yachts and boats and all these things going by, it creates a very unsafe situation for those kids. It creates an unsafe situation for the boaters as well, and certainly been something that has been talked about for a very long time. In fact, when I was elected to council in 2006, the first committee that I was asked to sit on was the Sea Cadet Relocation Committee. As you can see, we didn't do a very good job of relocating the Sea Cadets between 2006 and today. There have been many options that have been proposed. One was Tyndale Park. There was Minette's Point. There was, I believe, other places on the South Shore. And so that's a bit of a history of how long this has been going on. I asked today how long has it actually been going on, because I've been here since, my first was 06, and I was told it was about 25 years that this request has been ongoing. Next slide, please. The sailing area on the South Shore, as you can see, this is much more open, much less boat traffic. As you go to the west, there's the launching area, so that certainly has more boat traffic, but this is far better than what you see over with the marina downtown in terms of safety for all of those kids. Next slide, please. This is, your mayor is not a an artist. You can see that, but I wanted to kind of show what happened between September and today. In purple was the original place, I believe, that we had discussed having the Sea Cadets move to, with the parading ground essentially where it is right now. And that's not where we're going to see that happen. Our staff came back with an idea to use the South Shore. One, to save money. Two, because there's lots of empty times over at the South Shore. Three, because we already have boating facilities inside there, storage underneath. And four, we believed, except for the parading itself, that it could meet the needs of the Sea Cadets. Through that process, it was then looked at, well, if we're doing a parading ground and that's going in, what else could happen? And there was a petition that was circulated. I believe it was probably, and based on the audience tonight, it was probably a majority soccer plus cadets that came back. There was a couple of thousand-ish signatures to that, asking for it to be both parading ground, but also duplicating as a sports field for our young people to play at. So that's the background, and I'll go to the next slide, because there's a couple things I just want to set straight. I saw there's a petition being circulated that uses the word sportsplex. This is what shows up on Google when you look up sportsplex. This is not being proposed on your waterfront, and I certainly wouldn't support this being proposed on the waterfront. But there is a sports field being proposed. We'll go to the next slide, please. And that sports field is a multi-purpose field. We've used the word multi-use. The problem with the word multi-use, when I looked it up online, it did actually speak to not one, but many fields in the same place. And the correct term that we should be using for this is a multi-purpose field, which allows multiple things to happen on the same area rather than anything else. For perspective, this photo is not representative of what's being proposed in the city of Barrie. There is no track around it. It appears to be smaller based on everything I was able to see online. And next slide, please. I think that might be the end, but next slide. This is an example, I think, of, I took a Google Maps shot of this. This is an example, I think, of what you're probably going to see when it's all said and done with lines throughout. If you see that on the bottom left there, there's a canoe, a red canoe. That is taken, that picture is essentially just to the north of the Gardiner Expressway in Toronto. And this is a field that they have there. It's open to the public. If you go by at any time, you could have everything from kids to teenagers to adults playing soccer or other sports, and it usually has many different games happening at one time. And I think that is the end. Perfect, that's the end. So there's the context of what we're discussing this evening. The final piece I want to leave with members of committee before we go into the debate portion is that in the discussions with the Sea Cadets, when we were discussing, we were actually looking at originally an indoor parading area. That is not in the budget. The Sea Cadets have come to the table and said, okay, we get it, that's not in the budget, but can we do something outdoors? And now you see what that is. So there have already been some concessions made in order to facilitate this, and I'll now go to members of council who would either like to discuss the subject or to provide amendments. Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Manadal. And it is great to see the gallery full and to see the range of citizens. I think that's one of the exciting things about tonight. It's always challenging when our community isn't completely aligned on something, but it is great to see people from across the age spectrum here invested in our city and what we will do or not do with this piece of property. So thank you for that. Just wanted to address, I mean, Ward 8, we obviously, this is and I agree with everybody, it's a jewel of the city. It's everybody's property. It's not Ward 8's property. So everybody has a stake. So thank you for being here to take part. A few questions for you, through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Ms. Banfield. I think the primary concerns that have come to me relate to environmental concerns. What people see as the least developed part of the lakeshore is something that many appreciate, and their aim or hope is that it stays that way. And Mayor Nuttall, thank you for the prelim. It was really helpful to kind of set the context, because I even forgot about the Indigenous commitment on that side, which I know is maybe some of the questions that I had around the possibility of utilizing the space on that side of the South Shore does compromise our commitment to the Indigenous community, which we've made and are happy to, and also with the trees and the buds and all that beautification that will happen on that side. So I appreciate that context. So thank you, and I'm sure most people don't have that detail either. Some of you may, some of you may not. So I'm sure you appreciate it as well. Ms. Banfield, certainly with where it is, it's located by Campbell Bay. It's and so there's real concerns about the impact on the environment. What are the controls, the considerations, the standards that must be kept should we do anything with this land? I'm sure that we would have a great deal of responsibility to manage through Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority regulations and such, with anything that we did would meet those standards or exceed those standards?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harris, that's correct. There would be consultation with the Conservation Authority. There's reference to any trees that potentially may need to be removed, to be replanted, replaced, to have a net zero impact, and obviously the ability for council to determine whether we use natural turf or artificial turf. There's different environmental factors along with that, and quite frankly, it's a different project than what's been proposed before. It's a soccer field which is different than what has been proposed on the waterfront before.
Right, thank you. Yeah, so one field, one multi-purpose field. One of the other, Mayor Nuttall highlighted one of the important parts of the relocation of the Sea Cadets, and it was something that I learned actually was the importance of parading. In the report, and it was highlighted by Mayor Nuttall, I know it was noted as 100 meters by 77 meters. Can you give us some context? And I understand, again, being a novice in the parading, and we have members here from the Sea Cadets here who obviously would be experts on what is the desired parading size? Was that kind of a discussion about what could be done, or was that something that it was just one of those things where we thought it was this, but really is bigger? Is that something that we have any information on?
Through you, Councillor Nuttall, or Mayor Nuttall, sorry, to Councillor Harris. We did have preliminary discussions with the Sea Cadets in preparation of the 2023 September report that Mayor Nuttall referred to, estimating, and we have Ms. Chislett with us as well, roughly 500 participants on the field, and then I just did some quick math based on the new information. It would be about 2/3 of the multi-purpose field that would be required for parading, not half.
Okay, thank you for that. And so, and in the report, it talks about if you're going to have the parading area, then the potential is to make it a multi-use facility such that it's a better, I guess, investment and use for this particular site. Is what was yeah, thank you. You touched on it, Ms. Banfield, again through you, Mayor Nuttall, just the issue of the trees. So certainly, and also the other concern around from residents is the impact on any wildlife. I went by there, I'll say, and not to be smart, I saw a tent in there actually, is what a person living in there. But what is the impact, and what is the way to mitigate or review the impact on wildlife as we consider moving trees and reallocating to meet the tree standards? Is there a way to judge how much wildlife, what impact on wildlife will happen if this happens?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harris, absolutely. Like, there will be full reviews of the environmental, whether it's the trees or, as I said, if there is wildlife. Again, working with the Conservation Authority, working with the city's own terrestrial ecologist to evaluate all of those factors. And like the expectation would be for the city to be like any good property owner and address those impacts.
Wonderful, thank you. And Mayor Nuttall, maybe a couple more. With the path and people, all of us, I mean, if you're in Barrie, hopefully you've had a chance to enjoy the waterfront, the path. Can you explain how the path will be maintained or adjusted should this be approved and go forward?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harris, that I don't believe that there's the intention to impact the trail in this instance, and if there were impacts at the time as we were ground truthing things, we'd be making those trail connections. We'd revise them. We'd make the new connections. The intention is not to decrease connectivity in this area.
Great, thank you. And I had read that, but I wanted people to hear that because I think it's really important and not everybody has the time to go through the full report. And so thank you for that, answering that question. Maybe, and again, you mentioned both items, and they are connected. They're intricately connected. With regard to the new space that's going to be built in the existing space at the South Shore to include the Sea Cadets, I noticed that we would again be required to do an Indigenous, like a study to make sure that there was no Indigenous remains. Is that correct? So even though we didn't do a new building further to the south, we still are required to do an Indigenous study on, even though it's a site that's already been built on. Is that correct?
Ms. McAlpine.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, through Mayor Nuttall to Councillor Harris, yes, we would still be required to undertake at least stage 2, and from there, further information at that point.
Okay, thank you. And just maybe, I don't know if you, Ms. McAlpine, you're the expert in all things that happen in Barrie. Was there findings when the South Shore, when that work was done the last time?
Mayor Nuttall, through you to Councillor Harris, I don't believe there were any particular findings at the time. The standards have changed for some of that work over time, but I don't recall anything happening at that time.
Thank you. And maybe one more while I have, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I've also had members from the Canoe Club reach out around the potential impact on them. And I know it's in the report, but just again, for the record and people to hear, it is fully aware that we know that as if this goes forward and their space gets altered and enlarged to bring in a new partner, every effort will be made to mitigate the impact on their operations, their programming, and their use of the space.
Mayor Nuttall, through you to Councillor Harris, I can confirm that, and Mr. Hughes can provide additional information should the members of committee wish.
He was nodding very, very well to that, so thank you. And I'll try to be louder. I apologize for talking softly. Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I look forward to the conversation from the group around the table. I can say definitively that the Ward 8 members that live closest to this, the Manette's Point waterfront community, have expressed their concern. I think many are here tonight. And so I hopefully, and through that dialogue, most of those concerns will come forward. But the path, the wildlife, the impact on the environment, the trees, was certainly the high priority items. So thank you for addressing those. And again, thank you. It's National Youth Week, so good on the youth for being here tonight. I think that's wonderful. It's Children's Mental Health Week as well. I'll give a plug for that. So thank you for being invested in our community. Now, maybe one small thing I'm regretting, we don't yet have our youth council operating yet, because that's something that we had approved in this term. And I would really love to bring this item to a youth council, because often we hear a lot of comment on, people's opinions of what we don't want, but we don't often hear about the future-looking voice, and I see a lot of the future here tonight. So I really think it's important. Thank you for being here. We have to hear all voices and make a good decision with all the information. So thank you for being here, and I look forward to the discussion from other members of council.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to go in the order that I saw the hands, and that we'll start with Councillor Hamilton, then Councillor Harvey. I can't read my own writing. Then Councillor Rietma, Councillor Morales, Councillor Corser, and Councillor Negussi.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Nettle. I'm also happy to see the full stands this evening, because I think every resident in Barrie, believe that the waterfront is our gem, and we want to protect it at all costs. And any change to the waterfront makes us all a little bit anxious. So I completely, appreciate and respect the amount of input we're getting and opinions on this, because I do believe it's sensitive. I've had a number of conversations. I've spent a ton of time on this file and portfolio specifically, and I just want to review some of the concerns and questions that I'm getting, because I think it'd be helpful. And one is why? Why change anything? Why do anything differently? Our waterfront's beautiful, let's not touch it. And I think you've done a great job highlighting the need. This is the need to relocate the cadets has been an ongoing issue for 25 years. And I get the question, well, why? What's wrong with their current building? I wish we could show a video of inside the building. You did a high level. It's unsafe, as Mayor Nettle pointed out, just from the water perspective, and I'm frequent on the water, and I see these polar sailboarders, and I can attest to the fact that it's unsafe. But the building itself is decrepit. It's embarrassing that we have our youth in this building, in this facility, no washroom facilities. It's ancient, and here's a prime piece of our waterfront. If you guys have seen it, I'm sure we all have. You drive by it every single day. It's nothing to look at. So, there's just a desperate need to relocate them. So I think we cannot keep questioning that. If you are questioning it, I welcome you to go take a tour. They will be happy to tour you in there. You can see the facilities. You can see the need for new facilities. The cost to upgrade that, retrofit it, renovate it would be extreme. We're better off really looking at how do we leverage that asset? Could we have a waterfront restaurant? There's so many opportunities that we could actually utilize that land for. So I'm excited about the potential and the opportunity for that land. So where do we move them to? That's the second question. Well, why Southshore? Why here? As you've already said, staff have looked at so many other options. And for me, building a net new building, it costs money. If we can leverage a current asset, if we can leverage the Southshore Centre to not only benefit the cadets, but it will actually benefit the rowing club, the canoe and kayak club, to actually expand their facilities a little bit more as well. We are a growing city, and we have, to encourage and promote these types of activities, I think is so, so important. So for me, the question of the relocation of the cadets to the South Shore, I'm very, very confident and very, very comfortable with what's come back in the report. And I thank staff for doing the investigations over the past 25 years, and this is where we landed. I think this is the best option that we can come up with. In terms of the multi-purpose field and the need for the parade grounds, which I also respect and appreciate, and I think it was very important, the information that we heard tonight, clarifying the fact that these parade grounds would be 2/3, it's almost essentially the same size as what a soccer field would be. So if we have a field there, again, why don't we maximize the use of it? The cadets have great programming, and I know you serve hundreds of youth. Your camps are jam-packed. If you've seen those camps in the summer, they're hustling, they're bustling. But at the end of the day, it's a few hundred kids. How can we maximize that? How can we encourage it use by lacrosse, by soccer, by football? Well, it's making sure that that parade ground field is built in a way that we can maximize use and really promote it for all the kids to benefit from. I think Councillor Harris just made a great point. In this role, you often hear from adults, right? We get complaints every single day and opinions. It's so rare that we hear from the youth. And these are the residents that are going to live here over the next decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. I can't wait for the Youth Council. These are the opinions that we need to hear about. This is what they want. They want to be able to access our waterfront the same way we do as adults. And so for me, again, I get it. I get that it is scary and we want to protect our waterfront. I get the concerns about environment. I think, Ms. Banfield, you've appeased me in a little bit, even knowing the amount of work that staff is going to undertake to make sure that we get this right. We are making sure that we're planting 1,000 trees, 10,000 trees, always 1,000, 10,000 is a lot, 1,000 trees along the waterfront. So for me, I mean, there's got to be a middle ground here. I have stood on this property. I walk, I run, I cycle. I do all the things on the waterfront, so I'm intimately familiar. I see the foxes there. I see the water life. I absolutely understand. The area we're putting it is sort of that grassy area. For me, it will have the most minimal impact. And again, it's a field, it's green, it's artificial turf, but so I see both lenses, and I respect and appreciate anyone who's in opposition, because I do get some of the concerns are valid. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to look at the bigger picture and really looking at how do we build something that we can all be excited about, the next generation can be excited about, that really opens up and allows access for youth to really be on our waterfront in a fun and exciting way. So I know there's going to be pushback, I know there's going to be resistance, but and I've heard it from my residents. I'm happy to meet with my residents. I brought it to my Ward 10 Councillor Committee. We're happy to have people attend that in Ward 10 to ask more questions for it. And we went back and forth on this for months. Since we've talked about this, I think October was the first time it came. And I think staff has done an excellent job listening to all the input. So I am very supportive, and I'm just really excited to see all the bodies and faces here. I think it's predominantly soccer, but I know I've heard from people in lacrosse. I've heard from people in football as well. I think this is great, but we will take a slow, cautious approach to make sure we get it absolutely right.
Councillor Harvey? Sorry, folks. I know we want to give applause when somebody's saying what you agree with, but I'm going to ask that we don't do that. It's just the decorum we request inside the chambers. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I don't want to repeat everything, but essentially I do agree with the comments that have been made by my two colleagues so far. My big piece with this, especially from the Sea Cadet piece, as you highlighted, there's a safety issue with where they currently are. Not only is their building and the area around it a bit of an eyesore, but it's not the best use of that section of waterfront being so close to the core of our downtown. But especially when you look at it from a safety perspective with the marina traffic coming in and out of there, then you've got the other docks right beside them with the transient boaters. And like, I mean, myself being a boater myself, however, I don't boat out of Barrie. I've seen it countless times where boaters don't follow the rules when it comes to these non-motorized vessels, and they just go whizzing by them, cause a ridiculous wake, and sometimes almost flip them over. So I could imagine probably all the Sea Cadets probably have countless stories of things like that happening. And also, too, Kempenfelt Bay can get a little choppy on its own without having that careless boater going by at a rate of speed. But so that piece of it's a no-brainer. And obviously, they need a certain size to be able to do their parading. And it just totally makes sense that if we're already 2/3 of the size of a field, that you want to do something that's best use and service the most amount of people, opposed to the little bit of use that it would have if it was only just the Sea Cadets. So that's where, like, I mean, I do agree with what's being proposed. The location, obviously there's going to be differing opinions of that. However, when you look at where it's being placed and what's around it, I think staff have done the best possible job in trying to protect as much green space around it as possible, but also being able to place the field where it is. The only questions that I do have, and it's more from the sports side of it, because obviously the Sea Cadets, if they are relocated to the South Shore, have access to the bathrooms in the interior of the building during their time there. But it's more from the sports side of it. I know it does speak to it a little bit in the staff report. However, the rendering doesn't show, like, when you think about the amount of people that could come and watch, because I could see this as becoming potentially the place for the Rovers to play, potentially the place where we're going to see some of our high school teams starting to play, because this would be the first city-owned asset like this, because the other ones at Georgian and at the school in Ward 10, they're owned by the schools. So it limits our ability and access to them, whereas this is a city-owned asset. But would a future phase, or it doesn't really show about stands, because I would expect that we're going to potentially down the road have hundreds or so people coming to watch some of these games that are being played with parents and such forth, along with the possibility of a small building that would have a couple of change rooms and possibly washrooms. And I'm not so sure 70 parking spaces is quite enough. And I can see there's obviously some space as you're looking to the west that parking could be expanded a little bit. So just looking for staff's input as to why things are the way they are there and why we're not looking at having those additions from the onset if this does get approved.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey, thanks for the questions. And certainly in bullet 34 on the staff report, there's a list of items that are excluded, and one of those is the washrooms. And so there certainly is the ability to add to the budget, should council wish. Although, as you said, it could be done at a future phase. It doesn't necessarily have to be done right this minute, but it is flagged in there for council. As it relates to parking, as you said, there is some parking proposed, as well as a small area that could have an expansion. As well, there is waterfront parking kind of all along there as well. So again, there's definitely some elements that could be decided now or could be decided at a future phase, depending on council's wishes and budget.
Yeah, great, thank you. I'll leave my questions at that, but I think we're going in the right direction here. Like, I mean, this is definitely the best use, and getting the Sea Cadets onto this side of the bay opposed to the north side. The key is safety, and like, I mean, obviously we've, as been highlighted by Councillor Hamilton, I think our youth outnumber our adults here tonight. So it just speaks volumes. Obviously, it means something to the kids, probably a lot more than the adults, but and obviously we have to look out for them, and they're our future, as been highlighted too. So thank you, and those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. I'm now going to go to Councillor Riepma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I have just a couple of questions for Ms. Banfield. The first one is the drawing that we have in our report is quite clearly a very preliminary one. Can you just comment on what the next steps are in terms of design and exactly what you plan on doing?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Riepma, we're recommending a design-build approach for this project. It just has efficiencies with time and with cost. So we would be going through an RFP process, and then there would be design development that would be happening, or conceptual design, at the same time that we're actually starting to mobilize on site. There's where the efficiencies are in time. So certain types of site removals, site mobilization will be happening at the same time, but then the design process is going on concurrently.
My second question is, the South Shore building is a historically designated, and I'm just wondering what impacts or what is intended in terms of the process on that building.
Mayor Nuttall, through you to Councillor Riepma, there is no intent to impact any of the heritage features, which is the main floor of the building. All of the work to be done would be on the lower level, which is not part of the heritage designation, and similar to Mr. Bradley's response, it would be a design bid build process with architecture, an architect working through a comprehensive design and stakeholder engagement to inform that design.
Mr. Mayor, in terms of my comments, I think it's really high time, way past time, that the Sea Cadets, we move them to a location that works for them and will work for the city. They need a parade ground. I think that developing a parade ground the way staff have proposed it makes sense. I went out and walked the site. I think we've picked the area that will have the absolute least impact on the existing bush. And I think that if we do a proper replanting job, I think we will enhance that area. The waterfront is everybody's territory, right? Everybody's very concerned about what we do at the waterfront. And I think it belongs to all of the city, and we definitely need to do it right. But I think we're well on the way to doing that right. I think in terms of the multi-purpose field, I think that's exactly the right thing to do, because we're going to have a lot of people that want to use that facility and need to use that facility as we grow. So I think that we're on the right track on this one.
Thank you, Councillor Reitman. I'm now going to go to Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I didn't have notes, and I thank my colleagues for giving me some time to write some notes. It's better for everybody when I don't go off on tangents. Mayor Nuttall, I think we just need to stop holding ourselves back. Not you, not me, the royal we. Here's why. To the why not just leave it alone question. Because it shouldn't have taken 18 years since then Councillor Nuttall was appointed to the Sea Cadets Relocation Committee to get to this point, and it shouldn't take another 18 years for us to even do anything about this. What our residents have been asking of the city, Mayor Nuttall, has changed. I want to remind people, we say the waterfront's the jewel. We say it belongs to everybody, not just Ward 8. I agree with Councillor Reitman, it belongs to everybody, including residents that are all the way in the south end in Ward 910. And I think that's clear. But what our residents have asked of us have changed. Barrie used to be full of rail tracks, dirty rail tracks, tanneries on the waterfront for the kids who are young. Like, Bradford Street, Lakeshore, that was full of tanneries and polluted land. And we evolve. Things change. The sports we want to play have changed. The needs of our facilities, the organized sports have changed. And so we need to change with it. What I can't seem to understand is the fear of change of some of the residents in opposition, but I want to understand it. So some things that I think none of us want to see on our waterfronts: drug use, okay? Encampments, antisocial behavior, and a feeling where people of all ages and all genders don't feel safe walking at night, specifically along that stretch. So those are things we don't want to see on our waterfront. And adding a facility like this, Mayor Nuttall, is exactly the kind of thing. It's not a magic solution, but it's exactly the kind of thing that is going to mitigate those things that we don't want to see. Because what we do want to see is a people presence. We want to see organized youth activities, such as Sea Cadets and sports. And Mayor Nuttall, I don't know if you know this, I actually did Sea Cadets for about a year when I was younger. I wasn't a major Chambly person, but I do have the jingle stuck in my head of "We are Chambly, mighty, mighty Chambly." And if you can't hear us, shout a little louder. Yeah, fun fact. There's pictures out there. So that facility is a tin can. And I'm not going to be polite about it. It is a tin can. I'm thankful for the people in the 60s, 70s, and 80s that provided the facility. But again, we're ready for the next step. And to the youth in the audience, to the people in Sea Cadets, you deserve better than a tin can. You deserve the appropriate facilities to get into sailing, to get into knots, to get into those kind of things that will serve you well for the rest of your life. Another thing to the youth in the audience, because a couple of my colleagues have referred to them, I'm looking at the faces and I'm guessing on ages, but the majority of you will be eligible to vote in 2 elections from now. The majority of you will be able to run for one of these council seats 2 elections from now. And fun fact, the mayor and myself got elected at 21. So if you're like 13, 14, literally could be in the seat in 2 elections from now. If every single one of you voted, you could have flipped the mayor's federal election, you could have flipped my initial election, you could have flipped my election if you got another friend to vote. But my point being is that it does matter for you guys to show up, and I'm sure you showed up because your parents brought you, or coaches, so thanks to them as well. But it makes a difference, because these are the kind of things that if we don't make this decision, it's another 18 years possibly until we get to a situation where we can do this. Now, I'm going to go over some points, something that gives me peace of mind about this report, Mayor Nuttall. Public connectivity and the access is maintained. I actually initially thought we'd cut off that little walking path and it would have to go around and towards the road. No, the connectivity is maintained. That's huge. It's not, also, I'll be blunt about this, it's not even that many trees that need to be removed. If you pull up, and I'm not asking IT to do this, but if you pull up an image of what is there now as to where the field is going, I would say 65, 70% of that is actually right now just grass. And I'm not a tree person, but those trees aren't necessarily in the best of health. So we're not just going to a critical forest area. Finally, this activates our waterfront with a very appropriate size. And to the people in the stands that are concerned about this, don't want this here. I've said this before about another area of Barrie, and I'll say it again. If you don't like the size of that now, imagine how much you won't like it in a couple of years when a bigger, more commercial-like facility gets proposed, because it keeps happening. So one of the things I say to residents in my ward when they don't like a development because it's happened, it's not me threatening, it's not me being passive-aggressive, it's me saying, look at what has happened in situations where somebody was reporting a certain amount of density, it got defeated, and then comes back in a different market, different reality. What usually happens is their concerns go up because the things making them concerned get quote-unquote worse according to perspective. So that is also important. This is a very appropriate size and a very appropriate facility. And finally, Mayor Nuttall, a facility like this would empower parents to enroll their kids in activities that have better facilities, which increases retention rates, meaning more busy kids and young teens mean less idle kids getting into trouble. And I'm not blaming kids for breaking into cars or anything like that, but if we as a society want these kind of things to stop happening, we need to invest in our youth, right? How many times do we say we need to do preventative social justice initiatives and things like that, not at the end when people already have issues? This is the very kind of thing that we're talking about. So no, it's not inappropriate to bring up encampments. And if we want to just improve our society, this is an investment in our children, it's an investment in our waterfront, in our downtown economy, in our city, and in our future. Mayor Nuttall, the time has come for this multi-use field at this location, and I'm proud to be voting for it tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Morales, and I'll go to Councillor Corser.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'll parrot what everyone else has said around the table so far regarding the safety at the waterfront. I am a sailor. Where I keep my boat, we have a sailing school. And quite frankly, I see a lot of close calls and dangerous situations with powerboats and sailboats, people who don't know the rules of the road. And I know that our cadets definitely do. And there's that expectation of safety, and it's not there at our waterfront. I applaud the moving of the cadets for that reason. I've seen too many close calls. But I also have lots of questions. Just a few questions of staff on the actual field itself. First off, through you, Mayor Nuttall, to, I guess it would be Ms. Banfield. What is the lifespan of an artificial turf?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser, it would obviously depend on the amount of usage, but certainly there's areas of where it's anywhere between 13 to 15 years of usage.
And what would be done when the artificial turf needs to be replaced?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser, at that time it would most likely be a capital project that would be in the city's capital budget, and staff would price it out and do all of the things that we do with a capital project, making sure the artificial turf is disposed of properly and the site is remediated as we need to before we would replace it.
Beyond the capital costs, what is the recyclability at this point of an artificial turf? Where would that go? Would it go to landfill? What is the end life for that artificial turf?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser. What I can say is that manufacturers have heard this discussion and have changed their technologies, which allow these products to be post-use recycled, as they have not in the past, to avoid the landfill.
And that would be the plan with, if this goes forward, that would be, of course, the plan. We have we have the resources or a vendor or several vendors in Ontario or Canada or that could take on that responsibility at this time? 13 years out, it's a while, but sorry.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall. It would be designed into the specifications that we would be speccing a field that could be recycled at end of useful life. And then, yes, there is actually one company that works internationally that's out of Barrie that works in this field. They'll be welcome to bid on the project because it will be an open bid.
Okay, thank you. I asked because I know that there's several different plastics in industrial use that we assume are recyclable, and they are not. And if they are recyclable, the cost of actually shipping or having that done is cost prohibitive. So it's good to know that that has been looked at, and that future has been looked at. Also with the Vimy Ridge oak trees, the moving of the Vimy Ridge oak trees, there's a sensitive topic because they have been in for, how long have they been planted for? Sorry.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, the Council Courser, I'm guessing, but I'm going to say around 2015, 2014.
Okay, so they've been 9 years? Okay, so is the sensitivity, and I am not a gardening person, but I absolutely have a lot of concern about the health of the Vimy Ridge oak trees because they are quite significant in meaning. And there is as concerns about moving these oak trees after they've been planted for so long, uprooting them. There is no concern. Is there an area that has been chosen to replant those trees?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Courser, yes. So we've already met with urban forestry staff on site, done a full review of the 17 remaining Vimy oaks. There is an area of the plan that is set aside that will actually be more beneficial to their establishment and growth. They are not performing as well as hoped in the location they're in.
I had heard that. That's why I was concerned about moving them. So that's good news. Also, another question I have for staff is the enhanced fencing around the actual field. I'm wondering what, this is our waterfront, this is our taxpayers, our area. My concern is of the page 7 of the report, it says about enhanced security fencing surrounding that field. So I'm wondering, my concern is if that field is not in use as a booked event, kids' youth soccer, whatever it may be, lacrosse, are other people able to come in and use it? Or is this something that is going to be locked out to the public for general use without booking it or being part of an association?
Through you, Councillor, Mayor Nuttall to Councillor Courser, the intent for a facility of this investment, and typical in other cities, even Georgian Fields, is that it would be fenced. We do have issues with other sports fields where gates are left open. We do have gates, but we've left them open in consultation with ward councillors, and we have issues with them becoming informal dog parks, for example, vandalism in fields and other things. I think the key message with the fencing here is that, especially on the lakeshore, it will be buffered through sensitive landscape design. It'll be materials that'll be of a different color that will fade into the landscape. It's not going to be galvanized, for example, if that's a concern of council. So there is already pre-designed thought into how it'll appear.
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in there. I think Councillor Courser's question, because I've spoken with her, I think Councillor Courser's question, I've spoken with her in advance of this, is more, less around the look of it and more around the access for the public to it. And so rather than ask you a question, I'm just going to state a fact, if that's okay to council, which is we decide what happens at our recreational facilities, us 11 around this table. If we give the direction to our team to have somebody there running open access programs, or to leave it open at all times, or to close it off and only use it for elite sports. those are decisions that are made around this table, and staff can make recommendations, but the final decision, it's ours.
Okay, because I can appreciate the concerns about, I'm a extreme dog lover, but I can appreciate different areas where there's an open field and there's a fence around it and there's an entrance, so people will use these areas as unsanctioned, if you will, dog parks. And it becomes a concern when it is a sports field and you've got kids using that field for obvious reasons. So I understand the conflict with that, but I really would love to see this as a field that can be used by the public when it is not in use by an organization, associated team. So that is something that I would really like to see a conversation coming forward about that, because it is our public space. We should be able to use it. Also, another area that was touched on earlier about the spectator area for the future seating. Unlike some of my colleagues, I'm not in favor of having a built-up area, buildings around this. I think that it needs to be much more of a natural space, as much as natural as an artificial play field could be, sports field could be, but is there any plans, I've had questions about this as well, so I just wanted to make the question out there. Is there any plans right now or in the foreseeable future to build hard stands or bleachers in this sports field?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Courser. So there's probably some bleacher seating, but that's probably not what you're thinking. Like you're talking about, I think, more about like stadium seating and full-on tiered, almost like a building, if you will. So that's at this point not contemplated, but there will be some seating along the field for obvious reasons. Around 100 or so people or seats kind of thing versus, stadiums that could be well into the thousands.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that because parents got to sit somewhere and yell at the referees somewhere. But I like the idea of this being a community field and not an organized, branded sports field of any kind. This is our waterfront. It should remain so, and this field should be a community field and not commercialized, and that is where I stand on this. But I do think that I was against. I wasn't against it, but when I saw it come up, I felt a little kind of a little kick in the stomach on it, because I knew this was good. A lot of people are passionate about this topic. And then I remembered a lot of calls I got from friends. I always say that not every kid plays sports. That's my favorite saying in a lot of conversations we have. But I remember a lot of calls I've received from friends, good friends, and their kids do play sports, and there is a lack of fields for them to access. And so I'm really going out of my comfort zone with this, but I think that this is probably something that this city needs. I just hope that it's managed in a community-minded way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I also want to just take the opportunity to recognize former Mayor Aspin, who's with us this evening. Mayor Aspin, welcome back to the chambers, and thanks for joining us this evening. I'm going to go over to Councillor Negussi.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I read this staff report very carefully because change is sometimes, a challenge, and this is a huge change. So I had a few questions, and I reached out to Ms. Banfield and her team, and actually I just want to thank you to Ms. Banfield and her team for a quick response. I found it, your response very extremely great. Mayor Nuttall, our waterfront is one of the most spectacular attraction we have in our city. However, we have never used this specific waterfront location until now. Having a Sea Cadets and an open multi-purpose field for our kids to use for organized or drop-in sports. I mean, as a soccer coach myself, I believe it's a great achievement for all the residents of our city. And I believe this will be one of our most amazing community centers, regardless of our situation, background, status. I believe it will, belongs to all of us. And it takes, what it takes is our willingness to use this space. So I support this staff report, Mayor Noddle. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Negussi. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Noddle. To be honest, I wasn't really going to speak of this. I understand that it's very sensitive, the waterfront and stuff. And I think some people are kind of looking at this as the proposal, I want to believe, in 2017 about the baseball stadium, and it starts here. We go, we give them an inch, they take a mile. I don't think there's any desire around this table for, stadium seating, dressing rooms, and all that. I think this is about adding to our facilities for youth. Like, you look in this room, it's a lot of youth. And then I get thinking, and I see, I spend a lot of time with Councillor Harris, and he's in a tough predicament because it's in his ward. And, and I stop and I think sometimes, and I go, man, do we live in a privileged world? We complain about environment, this is going to affect and stuff. And then, if you don't mind, Carl, could you pull up, oh, thank you. If you could move over a little bit, I look at this and I go, we're going to put a field that people are worried about the environment, but we're privileged enough to live on the water. We live in a waterfront community where I look at this and I go, we're worried about young kids playing in a field. And then I think back to other things. We have a proposal for a very dense site at the fairgrounds. One of the biggest concerns from the residents was nowhere for anybody to play. No open fields, no spaces, no nothing. Well, this adds to that, an open space for people. And it just, I was surprised to see all the people, and like I said, we were getting emails and I was talking to people, and I think, when you elect people, you should be embarrassed if they don't do things for 25 years. This is the first time this is actually going to get done. This is what you elect people to do, to get things done. We have residents, all these parents that are with sports teams and the Sea Cadets and the Navy League and stuff. They're all volunteers to make our community great. And then we have some people that are they become obstructionists. They don't want no change. There's nothing that I ever see come here where everybody's enthusiastic about us moving forward. So I will be supporting this, and I understand some people's concerns. I had some great conversations with Ward 8 residents, but I think it's an overreach. I think some of the verbiage they've used and trying to push an agenda that really doesn't exist. This is for young kids, and I'll leave this with this one comment. The youth are 25% of our world. They're 100% of our future. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And you won't catch me throwing kids out of the council chamber, okay? I'm going to go over to Councillor Kungl.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I have a couple of comments, and then I'm holding off because I do have an amendment that I'll put forward, but I didn't want to jump into changing the conversation without being able to discuss the main item. Overall, I do want to thank the level of engagement from all parties that have reached out to, whether it's individual councillors or all of council and whatnot, to be involved in this because it's important to hear your voice. The other piece I'll say is, often I think we throw these really great ideas and visions at our staff, and they've always been able to come back with very, very mindful and considerate aspects around the caretaking of things that are very important to us. So to Ms. Banfield and your team, and Bala and your team between Parks and Forestry, I think we ask you to move the world for us sometimes around the art of what's possible, and you always come back with something that I think it is probably the best we'd ever see if we were going to consider this type of piece. So from the movement of the Vimy trees to the considerations of protecting the trails, the addition of water refillery stations and bike racks and that broader scope, I do want to actually really appreciate that. I think you've gone above and beyond around giving us a concept that helps us also to appreciate the art of the possible in this space and where our dollars are going. And so I do have an amendment that touches on the financial side, but I did want to comment on some of the pieces. I mean, the biggest piece, and I'm not an expert around artificial turf, but I do appreciate staff's comment around abilities to look at material that can be recyclable or reused, or in some way, hopefully being further into that technological changes as we go. I do appreciate that, in this, we've also had many, many different groups coming to council for sports and recreation opportunities and fields, and we do need to look at that broader strategy. And part of that, I think, was nicely put, that we've always talked a bit about the pilot in some way of understanding the pros and cons of artificial turf. So, with at least the balance of the information on hand, I'm okay to proceed forward with this, and with, I think, some of the diligence around it, and an appreciation of the other pros around whether that's, reserving water, and also not having to use fertilization. So I do see those things. Would love to know more as we proceed through this around the benefits and what we are finding out about artificial turf, so we can be mindful as we go forward in any other type of additions. My understanding is also it's a $10,000 at just over $10,000 less to manage year to year in operating this type of turf. So I thank you for that. Lastly, and I won't say, I have a fuller appreciation of the inside of the Sea Cadets unit as they hosted the public after the Battle of the Atlantic commemoration on Sunday. And you do amazing with what you have and for so long. So I'm also quite excited to see how this can be an updated space for other communities at Southshore. That is a high-use facility with a lot of long-term supporters in rowing and with the Barrie Canoe and Kayak Club. So it's nice to see that in addition to multi-use space, what we're going to be renovating around the Southshore, I think is also a bit overdue. And I think is to the benefit of many. So the investment I'm comfortable with. I do have an amendment.
Yes, Councillor.
I'm just going to pull that forward. So I do have, you've got in front of us on our agenda, just so I'm not reading the full 3 paragraphs, but just to let you know what I am looking to change. That paragraph 1 speaks to the synthetic turf multi-use concept. Paragraph 2 talks a bit about the funding, and paragraph 3 talks a bit about more of the operating maintenance dollars. So my amendment is specific to paragraph 2. And what I am doing is inserting a new revenue source. So it'll read, paragraph 2 will be changed to read the following: that the funding in the amount of $4,622,777 be approved for the implementation of the premium synthetic turf multi-use sports field concept, with 30% of funding from the development charges and 20% from the tax capital reserve, and half of the funding sourced from the cash in lieu of Parkland Reserve. And it was my understanding that this has been identified as an opportunity to be able to bring down the $4.6 million to actually needing to really find $1.2 to $1.4 million overall. So I thank staff, for identifying this opportunity. It may not be best to kind of get into the nitty-gritty, but I'm not sure if at this time anyone has questions about that, but that is the amendment.
Mr. Miller, today we chatted about this. Is there any more context you'd like to give to the amendment from Councillor Kungle?
To you, Mayor Nuttall, I'll actually just give you credit. You gave me a call and asked me to take another look, and it was a good question you asked. There is an opportunity to fund that portion from development charges.
So on that, I would say thank you for looking at this, because I know cost is always something we're quite mindful of, and not only how to make it happen, but how to make a pretty decent, like a beautiful concept, I'd have to say, credit to the team, come forward without maybe being as much hesitation about how we're going to fund it. So, Mr. Miller, thank you very much for being able to make me feel more comfortable that we can put something forward to the public and say, we've got 3/4 of the majority of, I think, funds at least accessible to us, and maybe the burden is a little bit less, but we'll find a way forward.
It's always a good day when developers are paying for 3/4 of the field. I got to be honest with you. Mr. Harvey, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'm supportive of this. I'm just kind of curious, through you to Mr. Miller, with a project like this, why wouldn't it all have come from cash in lieu of Parkland Reserve? Is it the fact that that reserve isn't funded well enough? And I think the key point for a big take-home for everybody here is this isn't going to hit anybody's tax bill. This is all coming from reserves, from other sources of revenue other than the tax bill. So that's the key take-home from this. But just kind of curious as to why you came up with the equation with the 50-50 split. I am supportive of the amendment, but it just seems like the cash in lieu of Parkland Reserve is exactly what this is for.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor. The flip side of the question might be, why isn't all development charge funded? And there were actually some projects identified in the DC study. Most of those costs were called post-period benefit, meaning they're after 2032. So we're not actually collecting those DC funds today. The portion, the 30% that we allocated in, we are actually collecting, and we have. So that was one opportunity to use existing DC funds. The cash in lieu and reserve, like a lot of the city's reserves, is committed. There are plans in that budget that council can change, but the intent is for land of parks. So the opportunity to use the DCs now allows more funding to be used for some future projects in the next few years.
And just a follow-up to that, because I know we've heard it several times at Finance Committee and such forth with presentations from yourself and your staff about the pressures on the development charge reserve, as if you were to sit and look at a graph, it goes up and then it sometimes takes some pretty deep dives, kind of levels off and slowly climbs back up. I gather you're confident that this DC reserve is going to be at an appropriate level moving forward, even with, in the grand scheme of things, when you look at what the DC reserve has been at, this is small change, although it's almost $5 million. But I gather you're very confident that this is not going to put any additional strain on the DC reserve?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey, great question. So this particular reserve of the DCs is for recreation services. It's a soft service. So I can tell you, if you look at the DC study, there are way more wants and needs than we are actually allowed to collect. The funds are available. We have them in the bank. So to answer your question, it's not really going to impact this amount of going forward. I think it's just the going forward, the bigger recreational needs that council has identified. We have to kind of manage those. So no, this won't, I'm confident this won't have a major impact.
Okay, great, thank you, because obviously I'm also looking out for my colleague at the far left here, because there's two rec centers in the wind, and obviously the one in the southeast is first in the pipeline, and I just wanted to make sure that it's not going to cause any additional strain or potential delays when it comes to getting our next rec center up and running too. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Councillor Harris?
Yeah, thank you. I'll be very quick. I'll support the amendment, but I will like to talk at the end on the amendment. You might most thank you.
Okay, all those in favor of the amendment? It carries. Councillor Harris, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. One thing that I wanted to touch on, and I do hear my colleagues around the table. I understand where people are positioned, and I respect my colleagues and what they've said. But again, recognizing the importance of the issues that have been raised, and I think the environmental issues, the impact on the trees and the area is important. So I think what I understand and hear from staff is that is central to this effort, that is key to this moving forward. One thing I just wanted to maybe help some context, and I forgot to ask the first time, was, this, the use of the turf is to extend the season. So again, to make a better investment, it's used longer into the winter or the late fall, and it's used earlier in the spring. Maybe through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Mr. Bell, what is the expected month to, like, it would open in month X and go to month Y? What is the expected opening season for this?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harris, the normal fields open, like the grass fields open on May 1st, and we generally keep them open as late as possible in the season until October. Depends a lot on the weather. An artificial turf field can extend the season on either side, but again, it depends on the type of weather we get. Snow, obviously, encumbers the usage of the field and would require snow removal. But certainly it does extend the life of the playing time.
Great, thank you. And I think, and for the residents, I think one of what I would have heard if I was a resident concern was that it's good news it's not active for 5 months a year. If I'm kind of extrapolating the 7 from if there's 5 that it won't be active, I mean, it's as a consolation. I just wanted to also touch on the environmental, and there's a lot of information about the turf versus grass. I remember we talked about it before. I'm a fan of Barrie's grass. Barrie does grass really well. I've had the pleasure of being around Ontario, whether it be soccer fields and baseball diamonds, and our grass is second to none, so congratulations to you and your staff. So I like the idea of a grass field. But I understand, and I read the report, I understand that, but one thing I'd also had been highlighted to me, I wasn't aware, as far as runoff and the impact of stormwater. Am I correct that I heard, and I don't know if it's through you, Mayor Nuttall, this is Mr. Bell again, I'm not sure, or Ms. Banfield, that it's actually better, given its location close to Kempenfelt Bay, it's better to be synthetic. We can control the water better with this type of application than if it was a grass field?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harris, so certainly the lack of water usage that you need to fertilize or to water an artificial turf, including the runoff, and it was already mentioned the lack of fertilizer. There's definitely some benefits to the use of it this close to Lake Simcoe.
Okay, thank you. And again, I in respect to the residents and the emails that I've received, they've all been read. The calls that I've had have been picked up, and I see the Facebook posts and I see the interest, but I also understand where this as an opportunity for our city lies. And full disclosure, most who know me, I love sports. Sports is a big part of my life and experience of living, growing up in Barrie. So Queen's Park was the place for fastball and softball, and Dunlop was the place for hockey and lacrosse and indoors. So, far be it for me to get in the way of the opportunity for young people to experience playing what I think would be a highlight, playing on the lakeshore on an incredible field. But I do think it's really important for us to really have the pause to think about the impact in this area. It is something very significantly different, and trying to manage the expectations and of a variety of different uses. I think I'm pleased that the path won't be altered. I think that was important. I heard that from people. So yeah, it's a really tough one for me. I won't deny. As far as youth goes, I mean, people know I was the one who brought forward the Community Recreation Fund because I wanted organizations to have funds to be able to improve recreation. I know the importance of healthy activities on young people, and the more we can encourage activity in today's world, especially when social media and smartphones are taking far too much of our youth's attention. And getting outside and playing is actually an antidote to that, and it's an antidote to depression, anxiety. It's better for your health. Get outside. If you can do anything for your health, get outside. So I'm really conflicted on my residents. I hear you and understand you, but also I see the Sea Cadets, I see the risk, I see the opportunity in that site. That's another part of it. I see the soccer, I see the opportunity for, and I've had residents reach out more quietly, but reach out about, hey, this would be great. My kids play lacrosse, my kids play soccer, and this is really, really exciting. So, you know, we'll hear more next week. We know that people will be here with their deputations for and against, which I look forward to. There's a full week of activity and opportunities to speak to all of us, so I encourage you to do that. So thank you, Mayor Nuttall, for the opportunity to just kind of share some thoughts, and I appreciate the dialogue from the colleagues.
Any other questions or comments from members of committee? Seeing none, I just wanted to speak to the residents in the area that are immediately surrounding this. About half of the area surrounding this. In fact, I would probably say that the closest area to this, I represented for 8 years on council. It used to be Ward 10 over in Minette's Point. It changed over to Ward 8. And I'll tell you this, one of the concerns that I've heard is the noise over at the field. And I want to speak to that directly. When I was on City Council, one of the projects I got to work on was helping to bring the GO train back to the City of Barrie. One of the downsides of bringing the GO train back to the City of Barrie was that there was a law that said every time a train went through an intersection in an urban area, it would toot its horn. Mayor Aspin, you probably remember this debate we had, and it would do it 3 times. So at 6 a.m. and 6:15 and 6:45 and 7:30, and then at 5 o'clock in the evening, at 6 o'clock in the evening, so on and so forth. There would be horn blasts going not just into that area, but right across the lake. We were getting complaints in Councillor Rietma's ward from those horn blasts. And we made the change, we applied to the federal government to make the change so that those horns did not have to be blasted every time a train went through those intersections, only when there was a threat of some sort of injury or somebody being in the way or something being in the way. And because of that change, you don't have those types of impacts in your life today that could have been there. That is a different subject than a bunch of kids playing in a park, for me. A totally different subject. And so when I look at it as mayor, I got to look around the whole city. You know, I grew up in Allandale and Painswick. Used to skateboard down that path to the skate park downtown far too often. I've spent my entire growing up in the Gables, another beautiful area just down the street, and this location, the South Shore. Councillor Hamilton grew up down the street from this. You know, we have to bring all of the different interests in and take what I see to be a lot of different special interests, quite frankly, asking for different things. And then we've got to weigh it, and we've got to make an informed, educated decision and move forward from there. And so these aren't easy decisions. It may sound easy because folks have now decided which way they're going to go, but it's taken a lot of time and effort from members of council to weigh out these things and come up with a decision. So I want to thank members of council for doing that in such a respectful manner, especially tonight. I understand the difficult position that Councillor Harris is in. And finally, I want to do this. I want to say thank you to our public servants, because I'll speak for myself and not the rest of council. I'm not always easy to work with or for, and I know that. But the work you've done in between has been absolutely incredible. It's now explained in a way that whether folks are in favor of it or against it, they understand what's being proposed. And it's been done to try to mitigate the impacts on the community around it. And so I just really want to say thank you for that, because I was more critical prior, and I'm less critical today, not critical at all. I think you've done a heck of a job on this. So Ms. Banfield, Mr. Bradley, team, Ms. McAlpine, Mr. Hughes, Mr. Bell, all of the folks who contributed in your departments, no matter what the outcome is, you have done incredible work on this subject, and I think it's work that we can be incredibly proud of going forward, so thank you for that. I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of the motion as amended on the floor? And it carries. The second vote we'll move right into is from the field to the Southshore Centre. And I can't remember who held that piece, if I can just look. Well, I got to do the main motion as amended.
Jim Harris.
We already voted, yeah. Okay, so we've already voted on both the main and the amended. And Councillor Harris, you held the Southshore Centre.
Yeah, I'll put that motion on the floor as printed, and I think the conversation has been held, so I don't think I have anything else to add on the South Shore relocation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Are there any other questions or comments with regards to South Shore? Seeing none, all those in favor? It carries. Members of the public, if you were here for these discussions, what's been approved this evening is the moving of the cadets from downtown to the South Shore Community Centre alongside parading ground and sports field to the east of the Military Heritage Park. If you would like to speak to this subject in the future, next week, please get a hold of our clerk in the next, 4 days? In the next 4 days, and you'll be able to come and make a deputation either in favor or against. And I'll now ask that if you can stay if you'd like to, but I'm sure lots of you don't want to stay, so feel free to leave, and we'll just take a 1-minute break here.
I'm here as the Cadet Liaison Officer for the Army, Navy, Air Force Club.
And why it was important for you to show up today?
Oh, my goodness, we've been fighting this. I was on City Council from 88 to up to 98. We were dealing with it way back then. There's not even any facilities, bathrooms or anything in that building where they've been for years. So it's overdue, and the safety, of course, because of the transient boating and so on. So yeah, it's really important to get this done, and I'm excited that they voted for it. And hopefully at council next week, nobody will change their mind and vote against it. So.
And what, for what purposes, you use the facility right now, and how you would use it in the future once the complex is built?
Oh, well, the thing that cadets do, they're learning all kinds of things. They're learning drill. That's why the parade square. But that'll just be used in the summertime. They will do parading and drill and everything on the inside of the building for the rest of the year. So
what's just a little bit about what drills, what activities they do?
Oh gosh, they learn to sail in the summer.
Yeah, we usually do drill.
What kind of drill?
Yeah.
We usually practice for parades and
in practicing for parades, what are you doing? Marching?
marching.
Learning all the commands
Learning
and so on?
commands, getting our timings right.
Yeah. And you're always learning how to tie knots. The semaphore with the flags. Oh, first aid. That's
We
right.
haven't done that in a while, but yeah, we do first aid.
Yeah. No, he's just in Navy League right now, so it's a little different, I guess. Yeah, next fall he's going into the Sea Cadets proper. So that's exciting. You'll be learning to sail and everything. Oh, yeah. Well, my son was a cadet. And so my love for the cadet programs goes way back. And that is why the Army, Navy, Air Force Club made a position that was brought up at a general meeting to have a cadet liaison officer. And it was voted that I would be the cadet liaison officer because I'm so excited about the programs that these kids are doing, all the cadet programs. They're our future. they're our future, so they're learning all kinds of things.
Next week, we will update you about the project from City Hall. Thank you for watching.